Hey everyone! Tonight we step quietly into the world of medieval peasants. Not to hear tales of kings or battles, but to uncover how ordinary people prepared for death long before their time came. While history often celebrates grand events, here we explore the subtle, deeply human rituals that shaped life's final moments. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with these gentle stories. Drop a comment sharing where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always amazing to see our global community. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's ease into tonight's peaceful journey together. The linen shrouds sewn years before their last breath. Imagine yourself in a small village centuries ago. The scent of earth, freshly turned by the farmer's plow, lingers faintly on the breeze. The sky is a soft gray, heavy with clouds that promise rain. Yet the fields still hold their golden harvest. You hear the gentle rustle of linen, the soft scratch of needle on cloth, and the low murmur of voices. Women quietly sewing, hour after hour, day after day. This is a world where the rhythm of life is measured not only by the seasons, but by the inevitable shadow of death that stretches long and steady behind every waking moment. In the homes of medieval peasants, beside the coarse wool garments and well-worn homespun, lay bundles of fine linen, delicately folded, kept carefully in wooden chests or woven baskets. These were the burial shrouds, sewn decades before they would ever be needed. For the peasants, stitching a shroud was not a morbid act, but a quiet acceptance, a practical preparation woven into the fabric of their daily lives. It was as much a part of the household as bread-making or tending animals. The linen shroud was a companion to every meal shared, every prayer whispered, every season endured. Imagine the texture of the linen itself, soft, cool, and smooth under callous fingers, yet strong enough to wrap the fragile body of a loved one. The fabric bore the faint smell of starch and lavender, herbs carefully tucked between the folds to bring a sense of peace. The stitching was simple but meticulous, a steady rhythm of thread passing through cloth, binding past and future with each loop. It was an act of devotion as well as duty, a tangible reminder that life was always unfolding beneath the weight of mortality. This practice was born out of a world where death was both constant and unpredictable. Epidemics swept across the countryside with quiet devastation. Winters came harsh and unforgiving. Accidents were never far from the hand that tilled the soil or climbed the rickety ladders of the barn. To live was to live beside the knowledge of an eventual farewell. Yet, there was a peculiar comfort in the ritual of preparation. To sew one's own shroud, or that of a family member, was to reclaim some small measure of control in a life otherwise governed by uncertainty. The slow passage of time in these rural communities gave space for reflection. The shroud was not simply a burial cloth, but a symbol of humility and acceptance, a final garment worn not for display but for dignity. In many villages, it was common for a woman to begin stitching the shroud shortly after her wedding day, continuing the work in quiet moments, weaving memories and prayers into each thread. The shroud was a silent companion to the cycles of planting and harvest, a constant presence in the background of daily existence. Moving from the humble homes of peasants, it is instructive to consider the broader cultural significance of burial shrouds across medieval Europe. Linen was prized for its purity and lightness, qualities that were thought to assist the soul in its journey beyond the physical world. The fabric's bright whiteness was associated with cleanliness and rebirth, a stark contrast to the often grim realities of life. Even the smallest piece of linen could carry great meaning, linking the living with the spiritual. In churches and monasteries, shrouds were sometimes adorned with simple embroidery, crosses, small flowers, or subtle symbols, reminders of faith and hope beyond the veil. Yet for the majority of rural folk, embellishment was rare or absent altogether, replaced by the quiet beauty of plain cloth, folded with care and respect. The act of sewing itself became a prayer, a meditation on life's fragility and the promise of rest. Imagine a peasant woman sitting by the flickering light of a tallow candle, her breath visible in the chill evening air. The room is quiet except for the soft scratch of needle through linen. Outside, the sounds of the village have long since fallen silent, leaving only the distant call of an owl and the faint rustling of trees in the night wind. In these moments, the boundary between the living and the future dead feels close, a gentle thread connecting generations. Each stitch carries the weight of unspoken thoughts. Hope for a full life, peace for the end, the eternal cycle of birth, toil, death, and renewal. Yet, this quiet preparation was not the privilege of peasants alone. Among wealthier classes, the concept of a prepared shroud also held importance, though it might be accompanied by richer fabrics and more elaborate rituals. But in these grander homes, where silk and velvet replaced humble linen, the stark truth remained the same. No amount of finery could alter the certainty of mortality. From an archaeological perspective, the discovery of ancient burial shrouds offers a glimpse into the intimate relationship between the living and their dead. Textile fragments found in graves, sometimes preserved by the soil or the careful craftsmanship of the burial, reveal the delicate care invested in preparing for the final journey. The quality of the linen, the simplicity of the stitch, and the placement of the cloth speak volumes about the culture, beliefs, and daily lives of those long past. These artifacts remind us that behind the grand events of history, the wars, the kings, the shifting borders, there was an endless continuity of quiet human moments. The everyday struggles, the small acts of care, the ritual of sewing a shroud decades before its need. A reminder that beneath the surface of time, life and death are forever entwined, like threads in the fabric of existence itself. Imagine, then, the weight of this knowledge resting softly on your mind as you drift toward rest. The linen shroud is more than cloth. It is a silent story of acceptance and dignity, a testament to lives lived fully under the gentle watch of time's inevitable passing. It asks us to consider not only how we live, but how we prepare to let go, weaving the delicate threads of presence, memory, and farewell. As you settle deeper, carried by the rhythm of quiet stitches and soft linen, let yourself drift with the knowledge that all who came before, from the richest lord to the humblest peasant, shared this intimate dance with time. The shroud sewn years before the last breath, resting quietly alongside life's daily rhythms, are whispers of a history that lives in the gentle, inevitable stillness of passing. The wooden coffin stored in loft beams over the hearth. Imagine yourself in a modest medieval household, a small cottage with walls made of roughly hewn timber, the air thick with the faint scent of smoke from a hearth, mingling with the earthy aroma of thatched straw and damp wood. The room is softly lit by the flickering flames dancing in the stone fireplace, where a pot simmers quietly, filling the space with the promise of a simple meal. Above you, near the ceiling, nestled between the thick wooden rafters that stretch across the room, lie pine coffins. These are not ornate or grandiose. They are simple, unvarnished boxes, carefully crafted during times when the family's hands were free and resources allowed. These coffins rest silently, their pale wood contrasting with the dark beams, looming like quiet witnesses to the rhythm of everyday life below. It may seem unsettling at first, dining and living beneath these resting places for the dead. But in many rural homes, this was a practical custom, not a morbid one. These coffins, often stored in the loft space or directly over the hearth, served as a reminder of life's impermanence without demanding constant attention. Their presence was a quiet acknowledgement. Life's journey is fragile, and death, while distant, is never far. In eras when mortality rates were high and the future uncertain, preparing a coffin well in advance was a sensible, even necessary measure. Unlike the hurried arrangements we imagine when death arrives unexpectedly, families who stored coffins in their homes did so in moments of relative calm, times of plenty when they could spare materials and labor. The coffins were modest, typically made from pine or similar softwood, chosen for ease of working and availability, rather than elegance. This practice was not restricted to a single region or century. It echoes across many peasant and rural communities throughout history, where the boundaries between life and death were fluid and close. The hearth, the center of warmth and sustenance, held a dual symbolism: the source of life's daily comfort and a reminder that life, like the fire, could be extinguished. The beams above, cradling these coffins, were repositories of preparation and acceptance. Imagine the texture of the wood beneath your fingertips. Smooth from careful planing, but still retaining the natural grain. Its edges sharp, yet worn slightly by time. The smell, faint but unmistakably pine, mingles with the faint smoke and wood smoke of the room. These coffins were objects of utility, quietly shaped by the hands of those who understood the cycles of harvest and hardship, of birth and inevitable loss. The placement of coffins in the loft or above the hearth was also a practical solution to space constraints. Homes were often small, with a single room serving as kitchen, living space and bedroom. Storage was precious. Loft spaces and beams, sturdy and out of the way, offered a logical location to keep these necessary items until the time came for their use. The coffins did not dominate daily life, but were a constant, unobtrusive presence. This tradition also tells us about attitudes toward death. Far from being taboo, the presence of a coffin in the home was an accepted, normalized aspect of life. The living and the dead coexisted closely. Death was a familiar neighbor, not a remote stranger. The preparation of these wooden boxes was a practical step in a longer continuum of care and readiness. Consider the quiet evenings when family members gathered around the hearth, voices lowered in conversation, shadows stretching along the walls. Above, the coffins rested in stillness, neither frightening nor sad, but simply there. Their presence offered a subtle grounding, a physical manifestation of the unspoken truth that every moment lived beneath these beams was borrowed time, a fragile gift to be valued. From a social perspective, making and storing a coffin ahead of time was a way to manage one of life's most certain expenses. Funeral rites, even in humble homes, required some form of container for the body. The ability to prepare a coffin indicated a degree of foresight and stability. It may have also represented a family's hope for longevity. To see that coffin and used for many years was a quiet victory over fate. Yet, in times of hardship, the coffins above might be called upon suddenly. Disease, accidents, and the harsher realities of life often claimed lives without warning. When a death occurred, the pre-made coffin was a practical relief amidst grief and confusion, a prepared vessel waiting to fulfill its solemn purpose. In these moments, the household transformed, from a place of daily comfort to a space of mourning and farewell. The presence of coffins overhead also ties into broader cultural beliefs about the household and protection. Some traditions held that keeping the coffin inside the home, close to the hearth, helped keep the spirit of the deceased near or ensured a proper passage into the afterlife. The hearth itself was seen as the heart of the home, a spiritual as well as physical center. The coffin's proximity may have been a way to honor the cyclical nature of existence. Life feeding on death, warmth held within the shadow of loss. As you imagine yourself in such a home, you might feel the contrast between the warm glow of the firelight and the quiet, shadowed presence above you. The rhythm of their lives was lived in the light and the dark, moments of joy and gathering balanced with a constant awareness of an inevitable end. The coffins are a gentle, constant reminder woven into the fabric of daily existence. This custom also invites reflection on how different societies approach mortality and preparation. In many modern contexts, death is carefully compartmentalized, often hidden away in hospitals or funeral homes. But in these older, rural settings, death was closer, more immediate, and woven into the daily space. The coffins stored in loft beams were not symbols of fear but practical, honest acknowledgments of life's fragility. Transitioning now, consider how this tradition contrasts with other historical practices around death. In wealthier households, coffins might have been ornately carved or commissioned from skilled carpenters, reserved only when death was near. In contrast, the common folk, who lived under the same uncertain skies, often took responsibility for their own preparations. The simplicity of the pine coffin speaks to this difference in resources, but also to a shared human impulse to prepare for the unknown with care and dignity. This practice also reveals much about the daily struggles and careful planning in rural life. Building a coffin was not a task taken lightly. It required wood, tools, and time, luxuries not always at hand. To create one in a time of plenty and set it aside was an act of prudent stewardship, an anticipation of the inevitable woven into the cycles of seasons and survival. In the quiet stillness of that cottage, under the beams where the coffins rested, life continued. Children played, meals were cooked, and stories were shared. Yet, the presence of these boxes overhead was a subtle echo of the past and future, an ever-present thread reminding those who live there that each day was part of a larger continuum. Imagine yourself slowly drifting to sleep beneath those beams, the crackle of the hearth a soothing lullaby, the pale wooden coffins watching silently from above, a testament to the delicate balance between life and the quiet certainty of what lies beyond. The prayer rolls hidden in stone wall niches. Imagine yourself standing quietly inside a modest medieval cottage, somewhere in the countryside of Europe. The faint light from a small window casts soft shadows across the worn wooden floorboards. The air is cool and thick with the subtle scent of damp earth and aged timber. It's the kind of stillness that invites reflection, a pause between the rhythms of daily toil and rest. And yet, in this quiet space, hidden just out of sight, lie secrets tucked away in the very walls themselves. Tiny scrolls of prayer, folded carefully and placed in the narrowest cracks or the smallest niches carved into stone. These prayer rolls, often little more than thin strips of parchment or vellum inscribed with humble words, were created by peasants and villagers as intimate tokens of faith. They served as quiet companions for the soul's journey after death, a bridge between the physical world and whatever might lie beyond. The scrolls were not grand or ornate, but personal, practical, and deeply meaningful in their simplicity. To understand these prayer rolls, it helps to imagine the world they came from, a world where death was a constant visitor, where the rhythm of life was shaped by the cycles of planting and harvest, and where hope for the afterlife was a thread woven through every day. The medieval peasant, bound to the land by both necessity and tradition, lived in close proximity to death. Disease, famine, harsh weather, and conflict meant that life was fragile, and so preparations for the final passage were never far from the mind. Crafting a prayer roll was a quiet act, one performed in the dim glow of an oil lamp or near the hearth's fading embers. The parchment was cut thin and long, often no bigger than a finger's width, and carefully inscribed with prayers, blessings, or psalms, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in the local tongue. These texts might invoke the protection of saints, ask for forgiveness, or beseech divine mercy. Each scroll was a personal talisman, folded and sealed with care. Once made, the scrolls were hidden in places that felt safe and sacred within the home. Many were slipped into crevices between stones in the walls, others tucked beneath loose floorboards or hidden beneath the hearth itself. These spots were not chosen at random, but with intention. The warmth of the hearth, for example, symbolized the heart of the home, a center of life and comfort. Placing prayers close to it was like offering a steady flame to guide the spirit when life's light dimmed. The walls of these humble homes thus became repositories of quiet hope, holding fast the whispered wishes of generations. It's easy to picture a child playing near the hearth, unaware of the tiny folded prayers resting silently nearby, or a mother kneeling by the fire. Her thoughts both on the day's labors and on the prayer she tucked away, just in case. Archaeological discoveries over the centuries have uncovered fragments of these prayer rolls in unexpected places. Tiny rolled parchments wedged into the stonework of ruins or beneath floorboards of ancient cottages. Though fragile and faded, these scrolls offer a tangible connection to the private spiritual lives of those long gone. They reveal not grand ceremonies or church rituals, but intimate moments of faith preserved in the ordinary spaces of everyday life. This practice also reflects a larger cultural landscape in which religion was not confined solely to the church or monastery, but lived in the home, in daily actions, and in objects both visible and hidden. The medieval peasant's world was steeped in ritual, from the blessings uttered before a meal to the simple sign of the cross made upon rising and retiring. Prayer rolls are a quiet extension of this pervasive spiritual atmosphere. Imagine, then, the soft texture of the parchment under your fingers, the delicate, flowing script penned by a shaky hand, the faint scent of ink mingling with smoke and earth. These rolls were humble yet potent carriers of faith. Small vessels meant to accompany the soul when it left the familiar embrace of the cottage behind. They also represent a poignant contrast. In a world of hard labor, unpredictable weather, and sudden loss, such small acts offered a measure of control, a way to prepare for the unknown with hope rather than fear. The prayer rolls were a gentle promise that even in death, one was not alone. Beyond their spiritual significance, the prayer rolls also highlight the resourcefulness of rural communities. Parchment was a precious material, often reused or salvaged. The fact that peasants could access it, or commission scribes to prepare these scrolls, speaks to the importance placed on spiritual preparedness. Some scrolls were even mass-produced in small batches by local monasteries or religious houses, then distributed among villagers. The act of hiding these prayers in the walls or under the floor was itself an expression of faith and trust. The cottage walls were not simply barriers against the weather. They were silent witnesses to life's cycles, birth, labor, illness, and death. Placing prayers within them was a way of weaving the sacred into the very fabric of daily existence. At times, these hidden prayer scrolls took on additional meaning. In periods of social unrest or plague, when the threat of sudden death loomed large, the presence of these tokens became all the more urgent. They were silent prayers against misfortune, humble shields against the unknown. Yet, despite their intimacy and frequency, these prayer rolls rarely appear in the grand chronicles of history. They are the whispers beneath the louder stories of kings and battles, the quiet notes in the symphony of medieval life. It is only through patient archaeology and the attentive reading of small details that their stories emerge. In some regions, the tradition evolved, blending with local customs. Similar hidden charms or amulets could be found tucked into walls, sometimes inscribed with symbols or images meant to ward off evil spirits or bring good fortune. The boundary between prayer and protective magic was often fluid, reflecting a complex relationship with faith and superstition. The discovery of prayer rolls also invites us to consider the materiality of faith, the physical ways belief is embodied and preserved. The delicate scroll, the cracked stone niche, the creaking floorboard. These are not just objects but containers of memory and intention. They remind us that spirituality is not only practiced in words or ceremony, but also in the quiet acts of care that shape a home. As you imagine these prayer rolls nestled in their secret places, think of the hands that made them, the voices that whispered the prayers, the lives lived quietly beneath the thatched roofs. Each fold of parchment was a breath, a hope, a bridge between the earthly and the eternal. So next time you find yourself in an old stone cottage, beneath the thick walls worn smooth by time, consider the invisible presence of those hidden prayers. They lie waiting still, small tokens of human hope and faith, quietly cradled in the stones, a testament to the enduring desire for peace beyond the final threshold. The prayer rolls, tucked away in stone wall niches and beneath floorboards, remain a subtle but profound reminder that even in the humblest lives, the need to prepare for what comes after was never forgotten. They invite us to listen closely, to the silent corners of history, to the whispered prayers folded into the very walls that sheltered so many. The candles set aside to light their own final vigils. Imagine yourself in a modest peasant cottage somewhere in medieval Europe. The soft morning light filters through a window framed by rough-hewn wooden shutters, casting long, quiet shadows over the simple furnishings. A worn table, a rough bench, a small hearth where the last embers of last night's fire slowly fade into ash. This is a world measured not by luxury or grandeur, but by the rhythm of daily toil and the constancy of cycles. Planting, harvest, cold winters, and fleeting summers. In this world, one small, deliberate act holds a significance both practical and deeply symbolic. The setting aside of a single beeswax candle, carefully wrapped and preserved, never to be lit until the moment when breath ceases and the body lies still. It might seem a simple detail, a small light in the quiet, but it reveals much about the relationship between life, death, and remembrance in a time when the boundary between the living and the departed felt both fragile and profound. Beeswax candles were precious commodities in these rural households. Unlike tallow candles made from animal fat, beeswax burned cleanly and steadily, with a gentle golden glow and a faint, natural fragrance reminiscent of honey and wildflowers. They required care, skill, and sometimes trade to acquire, making them more valuable than the humble candles that might have flickered throughout the day. To save one for the final vigil was a conscious choice, a way to honor the passing of a family member with dignity and quiet respect. Imagine the hands that folded the cloth around this candle, weathered from years of work, planting seeds, tending animals, weaving cloth. These hands moved with a deliberate calm. The candle was not just light. It was a final companion, a symbol of hope, warmth, and the enduring presence of those who had come before. It would be placed by the head of the bed when the house finally fell silent, a gentle sentinel for the departed soul's journey onward. Families understood the ritual intimately. The night before, the household might gather in hushed tones, voices softened as the candle was brought out. Perhaps a prayer or a whispered wish accompanied its lighting. A wish for safe passage, for comfort, for a peaceful rest. The candle's flame, slender and steady, cast soft shadows that danced slowly on the walls, a calm contrast to the sorrow that wrapped the room. The practice of reserving a candle for the final vigil was more than superstition or habit. It was woven into the very fabric of peasant life, touching on beliefs about death, the afterlife, and the power of light to guide spirits through darkness. In an age before electric illumination, light held both practical and spiritual significance. It warded off the unknown, connected the physical and spiritual worlds, and marked transitions from one state of being to another. This custom also spoke to the household's relationship with time and memory. Life in these communities was a constant struggle against scarcity and hardship. Yet within these challenges, families sought to create moments of meaning and continuity. The candle was a token of care that outlived daily worries, a small but deliberate act of preparation for the inevitable, and a way to honor the departed beyond their earthly struggles. The broader social fabric reflected this intimate ritual. In village chapels and parish churches, light and flame featured in the rites of passage from birth to death. Candles were lit at baptisms, weddings, and funerals, each ceremony marked by flickering flames that symbolized life, hope, and community. The final vigil candle echoed these larger traditions on a personal scale, an extension of communal faith and a private gesture of remembrance. Turning to the archaeological record, we find evidence that supports the significance of candles in death rituals. Excavations of medieval homes and burial sites have uncovered remnants of beeswax and candle holders, sometimes carefully placed in corners or niches thought to hold spiritual meaning. Though the fragile nature of these items means they rarely survive intact, the traces that remain tell a story of a practice valued across regions and generations. You can almost hear the faint crackle as the candle burns down through the night. A quiet companion to the stillness of a room where life has just slipped away. It marks a final passage not with noise or spectacle, but with gentle light. An enduring human gesture, simple and profound. This custom also reveals contrasts in daily life. While peasants reserved their precious beeswax candles for these final moments, wealthier households might have more elaborate death rites. Candles arranged in large numbers, ornate candelabra, or church-sponsored masses to accompany the soul's journey. Yet, across social boundaries, the symbolism of light remained constant, a shared language of comfort and transition. In the long shadow of death, life continued. The candle's flame, however brief, linked the present to the past and the future. It was a beacon in the quiet night, a witness to the sacred passage, and a reminder that even in the humblest homes, rituals of care and remembrance held deep meaning. So, next time you imagine a quiet room, the hush of a house at rest, consider the small beeswax candle, patiently waiting. Its flame, though fleeting, bridged the fragile gap between worlds, lighting a path for the soul's last journey and comforting those left behind in the gentle glow of memory. The burial plots marked long before sickness arrived. Imagine yourself walking slowly through a quiet village churchyard in the centuries past, long before the first chill of sickness settled into the bones of the community, long before the inevitable reckonings of fate and mortality took their toll. The air is still, thick with the scent of damp earth and aged stone, under the gentle sway of an overcast sky. Here, in this tranquil space, the rhythm of life and the awareness of death coexist in a delicate balance. Among the simple headstones and the scattered wooden markers, some resting places have already been claimed, marked long before the need for them arrived. This practice, quietly pragmatic yet deeply meaningful, was not uncommon in medieval and early modern rural communities. Peasants and villagers, living with the constant shadow of uncertainty, whether from famine, war, or disease, sometimes chose and prepared their burial plots years, even decades in advance. Their names, carefully inscribed or crudely carved, waited patiently on stone or wood to mark where their journey would finally pause. You might wonder what prompted such foresight in a world where survival itself was a constant struggle. Imagine the weight of everyday life in those times. The laboring under a heavy sun in fields of barley and rye, the close-knit social fabric of village life, and the ever-present whisper of mortality. Preparing one's final resting place was both a practical act and a quiet acceptance of the inevitable, a way to reclaim some small measure of control over a life so often at the mercy of forces beyond human grasp. In many villages, the churchyard was the heart of the community's relationship with death. It was more than a mere graveyard. It was a sacred ground, consecrated and hallowed, where earth and spirit met. Here, peasants' graves were arranged in close proximity, reflecting both the unity of their daily lives and their shared passage into the unknown. Yet not everyone waited for death to claim their place. Some brought with them a wooden cross or a stone slab, etched with names or symbols, marking the spot where their bodies would rest. This act, humble but profound, spoke of preparation, of a life lived with the future ever in view. The markers themselves varied in form and detail. Some were simple wooden stakes, roughly shaped by a local craftsman, or even by the person who would lie beneath. The wood, weathered and softened by years of rain and sun, sometimes bore inscriptions that only time and nature could almost erase. Others were carved stones, perhaps fashioned by a traveling mason, their inscriptions faint but enduring, names, dates, and prayers delicately worn by the passage of seasons. The choice of material often depended on a family's means or the village's customs, yet the intent remained constant: to to claim a place, to be remembered. Imagine the quiet care with which these plots were prepared. The earth turned over gently, the space cleared and set apart from the bustle of daily chores. Sometimes, families stored simple tokens or small bundles nearby, a modest offering to the future, an act of respect bridging the present and the days yet to come. These preparations were not seen as morbid, but rather as practical and even hopeful, a tangible link between life and the afterlife, between the living and the departed. In times of peace, the marking of burial plots was a slow, deliberate process, woven into the steady rhythm of village life. Yet when sickness swept through, a fever here, a plague there, the quiet acceptance embodied in these pre-chosen graves took on new meaning. The churchyards quickly filled, as lives were abruptly shortened, and the markers that had waited so patiently were called into purpose. The neat rows of stones and crosses became places of sorrow and remembrance, but also of resilience. It is important to recognize that preparing one's burial place well before death was also a reflection of the social realities of the time. Land was precious and limited, and churchyards were shared by many generations. Having a designated spot ensured that one's family would not have to scramble amid chaos to secure a resting place. It was a final gesture of care toward those left behind, a gift of certainty amid life's many uncertainties. Imagine, then, the quiet dignity of those villagers who took this step. They were not preoccupied with fear, but rather grounded in a deep, practical awareness of their existence. Their lives were hard and often unpredictable, shaped by the cycle of seasons and the constraints of a largely agrarian world. Yet even in such simplicity, they found a way to assert permanence. A name carved in stone, a wooden cross planted firmly in the earth, a small plot set aside in a sacred place. The act of marking a burial plot long before sickness arrived also illustrates a broader cultural attitude toward death. Death was never a distant or hidden concept. It was woven into the fabric of everyday life, acknowledged with a quiet calm that modern sensibilities might find foreign. Funerals were communal affairs, rituals attended by neighbors and family, an important moment of collective memory and transition. But before all that, there was this intimate act of preparation, an anticipatory gesture that connected the living with the inevitability of the end. As you imagine yourself wandering through these churchyards, the rustle of leaves underfoot, the faint outline of carved names softened by centuries, there is a sense of continuity. A reminder that, for all the passage of time, certain human concerns remain constant. The desire to be remembered, to have a place in the earth, to bridge the divide between life and death with grace. Over time, some of these early markers became the oldest inscriptions in the village, silent witnesses to generations of births, marriages, and deaths. Archaeologists today, studying these churchyards, uncover stories embedded in the soil, of families who lived, loved, and prepared for their final rest with care and forethought. The graves tell of a life intertwined with the land and the community, a life that embraced both toil and tenderness. In reflecting on these practices, it's worth considering how the relationship between the living and the dead was both practical and spiritual. The choice of burial plot was a negotiation with time itself, a small claim on the future. It was an acceptance of human limits, and a testament to the desire for order and remembrance in a world often marked by unpredictability. So, as you close your eyes and picture that quiet churchyard once more, imagine the patience of those who carved their names into stone, who planted wooden markers with steady hands, who waited calmly in the rhythm of their lives for the moment when their place would be called. Their stories rest quietly beneath the soil, marked long before sickness arrived, a gentle testament to the intertwining of life, death, and memory. The testament stones etched with modest instructions. Imagine yourself stepping into a quiet village of long ago, where stone cottages huddle together beneath an open sky, smoke curling softly from chimneys. The air is cool and still, thick with the scent of moss, earth, and wood smoke. The days move slowly here, measured by the turning of seasons and the patient growth of crops. In this place, life is shaped by routine and the land's generous, yet demanding gifts. In such villages, written words were often a rare treasure. Literacy was uncommon among the peasantry. Official documents and formal legal wills belonged to those with privilege, education, and access to scribes. Yet even without these, the need to record wishes, however modest, was deeply felt. To prepare for the inevitable passing of a family member, to ensure order after loss, was a matter of quiet necessity. Here enters the humble testament stone. Imagine a smooth, weathered stone, small enough to fit comfortably in the hand, but large enough to carry a message. On its surface, simple inscriptions are carefully carved. Names, brief instructions, perhaps a symbol or two. These stones were kept inside cottages, tucked away in corners, sometimes hidden beneath floorboards or placed on shelves alongside everyday items. They waited patiently, silent and unassuming, until the moment when their words would be needed most. The messages etched on these stones were never grand or complicated. They reflected the practical concerns of peasant life. Who was to tend the garden after the gardener had passed, which child should inherit a favored tool, or who might take care of the livestock. These instructions were modest in nature, yet profoundly important. They offered continuity in a world where uncertainty was a constant companion. Imagine tracing the worn edges of such a stone, feeling the faint grooves worn smooth by generations of fingers. The letters might be uneven, imperfect, carved by hands not trained in calligraphy, but guided by deep intention. Each mark was a tether cast forward, a way to shape the future from the quiet certainty of present knowledge. This practice of inscribing stones speaks to the human desire for connection beyond the bounds of life. It reflects a need to be remembered, to pass on responsibility, and to protect the fabric of family and community when voices grow silent. In the absence of formal records, these stones were a people's archive, simple, durable, and honest. The stones also reveal much about the culture and values of these communities. In a society where possessions were few, every tool, every patch of garden, every small piece of land was treasured. To name an heir for these things was to protect not only physical objects, but the relationships and roles that sustain daily life. The stones were quiet contracts, binding the living to the memory and wishes of those gone before. Imagine a village elder, nearing the end of their days, taking up a chisel and slowly etching instructions into a stone. Their hands tremble slightly, but their mind is steady, recalling the names of kin, the needs of neighbors, the fragile balance that holds their world together. The stone becomes a physical testament, a bridge between the known past and the uncertain future. From an archaeological viewpoint, these stones, when discovered, offer invaluable insight. Their inscriptions, though brief and modest, speak louder than many grander documents. They tell us of everyday lives, of small struggles and quiet acts of care. Each stone is a fragment of a larger story. How people lived, how they prepared for death, and how they sought to care for one another beyond their own time. While the writing on these stones might seem plain, their impact was deeply felt. They eased disputes, settled questions of inheritance, and preserved bonds that might otherwise have frayed in the aftermath of loss. They remind us that even without formal laws, communities found ways to create order and continuity. Picture the stones resting in their cottages, gathering dust over years, until a day arrives when their words must be read aloud. When family members gather, voices hushed, and hands reach out to the modest stones that hold the last wishes of those who once lived there. The stones speak quietly but clearly, guiding the hands that will continue the work of tending, building, and living. In this way, the testament stones carry a gentle message across time, that even the simplest records, etched with care and intention, can shape the lives of those who come after. They are reminders that preparation is itself an act of love, a thread weaving through generations, fragile yet enduring. As you settle into the calm rhythm of this story, let the image of those stones, quiet, unassuming, steadfast, rest softly in your mind. Their carved letters are not just marks on rock, but the echo of human hearts, reaching out across years with modest instructions, steady hands, and enduring hope. The coins sewn into hemlines for church offerings. Imagine yourself in a modest medieval village, where the rhythm of life flows gently with the seasons, the sound of church bells marking the passing hours. The village church stands at the heart of the community. Its stone walls weathered by centuries, its wooden doors heavy but welcoming. Inside, the faint scent of beeswax candles and incense lingers in the cool, quiet air, mingling with the subtle echoes of whispered prayers. Now picture a simple garment, perhaps a woolen tunic or a linen dress, worn day after day through chores, markets, and quiet moments at home. Along its hem, carefully sewn into the fold, lies a small treasure. A coin or two, hidden away from sight, but never far from the wearer's thoughts. These coins were not mere decoration or accidental finds. They were gifts set aside with intention, quietly carried toward the sacred. This humble act of sewing coins into clothing was a widespread tradition, practiced by families who wished to ensure spiritual care for themselves and their loved ones. The coins served as offerings to the church, payments for prayers said by priests, masses said on behalf of souls departed or in need of protection. In times when money was scarce and resources tightly rationed, even these modest gifts held profound significance. Imagine the hands that placed those coins in the hems, calloused yet careful, fingers threading the needle through thick fabric, folding the edge just so to conceal the small silver or copper disc. The action was deliberate, an unspoken hope woven into the garment's very fibers. It was believed that these offerings ensured the soul would be remembered and honored at the altar long after the wearer had passed beyond the veil. The sewing of coins into clothing reflects a deeply practical and intimate relationship with faith. Churches were centers not only of worship, but of community care and spiritual security. Priests held the vital role of interceding between the earthly and the divine, and their prayers were thought to guide souls safely through the uncertain journey beyond life. In a time before widespread written records, before tombstones marked every grave, the assurance that one's name would be spoken aloud during Mass was invaluable. The coins tucked discreetly in hems were a form of spiritual insurance, a small price paid to guarantee remembrance and favor in the eyes of God. The practice also reveals much about the economy of everyday faith. Currency was precious, often hard-earned through long hours of toil. Yet families found ways to sacrifice a coin or two in humble devotion. The sewn coins traveled invisibly with their owners through markets, fields, and hearths, quietly bearing witness to the mingling of daily life and sacred duty. Think of the fabric itself. Coarse linen or rough wool, dyed in muted earth tones, faded by sunlight and washing. The coin, smooth and cold, nestled against the cloth's rough texture, held tight by a few careful stitches. It was hidden from prying eyes, but always close. A silent companion in life's ordinary moments, and a promise for the moments yet to come. This custom also tells us about the blending of the spiritual and the mundane. Unlike grand church donations or ostentatious gifts from nobility, these small offerings were deeply personal, born from the modest means of common folk. They demonstrate how faith permeated even the humblest garments, carrying hope and remembrance in every thread. From a social perspective, sewing coins into clothing was a subtle way to maintain dignity and privacy in matters of faith and death. It allowed individuals to prepare for their spiritual needs discreetly, without drawing attention or relying on others' charity. This quiet agency, planning one's own prayers and offerings, was a powerful act amid the uncertainties of medieval life. Imagine now the moment when the coin's purpose was fulfilled. After death, the garment might be carefully removed and presented to the priest, the coins extracted to fund the prayers that would carry the soul toward peace. Or perhaps the coins passed from generation to generation, serving as a tangible link between the living and the dead. A reminder that love and faith endure beyond the visible. The practice of sewing coins into hems also connects with broader medieval customs around death and remembrance. In a world where mortality was a constant companion, rituals and offerings provided structure and comfort. These coins symbolized not just payment, but a promise. One that the departed would not be forgotten, that their name would be spoken in sacred space, and that their journey would be honored. Imagine yourself slowly drifting in a quiet room, the soft rustle of fabric accompanying your thoughts, the faint metallic weight of a coin pressed gently beneath your fingertips. This small, silent object bridges the gap between the earthly and the eternal, carrying hopes sewn into cloth and prayers whispered beneath vaulted ceilings. As you rest, let this image linger. The humble coin, hidden in the folds of a worn garment, a tiny but steadfast token of faith, memory, and the enduring human desire to be remembered. The beds made each night as if for the last time. Imagine yourself in a small, dimly lit room, the hearth's last embers glowing faintly. The day's labors have ended, and the quiet rhythm of evening begins to settle. In the soft twilight, a figure moves slowly to the bed. A simple wooden frame, straw-filled mattress, and rough linens. There is no rush, only a careful attention to each fold and tuck, smoothing the bedding with deliberate care. It is more than just tidying. It is a ritual, a daily preparation done as if this night might be the last. In medieval and early modern households, this custom of making the bed with intention and care each evening was widespread, especially among the peasant and working classes. Chroniclers of the period took note of it, describing how this seemingly mundane act was suffused with a deeper meaning, a quiet acknowledgement of mortality and the uncertainty of life. The beds themselves were modest but essential. Wooden frames roughly hewn by local carpenters, with mattresses stuffed from hay, straw, or sometimes feathers for those slightly better off. The linens were often homespun, rough but carefully maintained, washed by hand and aired in the sun when possible. Despite their simplicity, beds were places of refuge, where the body could rest and recover from the constant toil of daily life. Each night, the bedding was smoothed with gentle hands, the sheets pulled tight, the blankets folded neatly. This wasn't merely about comfort or tidiness. It was a conscious preparation for rest that might be eternal. The act was both practical and symbolic, a way to meet the unknown with calmness and dignity. Imagine the quiet sounds of this ritual, the soft rustle of fabric, the faint creak of wooden slats, the whisper of breath in the cool night air. The room might be silent except for the occasional crackle from the dying fire, or the distant murmur of village life slowing to a close. In these moments, the household prepared not just for sleep, but for the possibility that dawn might never come. This practice echoes a broader cultural attitude towards death in pre-modern times. Life was fragile. Disease, accident, and conflict were ever-present threats. People lived in close proximity to death, and the line between daily life and final rest was thin. The beds, made with such care, became a metaphor for this truth. There was comfort, too, in the ritual itself. The repetitive, mindful act of smoothing the bedding provided a moment of calm, a way to acknowledge the day's passing and prepare the spirit for whatever lay ahead. It was an intimate encounter with uncertainty, softened by routine and care. Contemporary writers and observers sometimes remarked on this habit. One chronicler noted that peasants treated their beds as if they were laying down for the last sleep, a phrase that captures both the solemnity and the gentle acceptance found in this simple act. The ritual was neither morbid nor fearful. It was a steady, quiet bravery. In homes where space was limited and beds shared, the act of preparing the bed also reinforced social bonds. Families gathered around the hearth, and making the bed together was part of the shared rhythm of life. It was a moment to pause, to come together, to prepare for rest and renewal. Or, perhaps, final farewell. Imagine the texture of the linens beneath your fingertips. Worn but clean, the slight roughness softened by repeated use. Feel the coolness of the night air that drifts through the cracks in the wooden walls. Hear the faint creaking of the bed frame as the weight of the night settles in. This practice also reveals a subtle but profound relationship with time. Each night's preparation was an act of hope and humility combined. A hope that tomorrow would come, and humility in the face of life's unpredictability. The bed was a place both to lay down burdens and to face the unknown with quiet resolve. As you picture this, the simplicity of the ritual is striking. No grand gestures, no elaborate prayers, just the steady, tender preparation of a place to rest. It's a reminder that even in the face of life's impermanence, human beings seek comfort and order. Small acts that anchor us amid uncertainty. In many ways, the nightly making of the bed, as if it were the last, was a kind of meditation. It was a moment where the past day's struggles gave way to a hopeful, gentle surrender to rest. It invited a gentle mindfulness, a pause that quietly embraced the inevitable cycle of life and death. This custom, quietly observed and recorded by chroniclers, reminds us that rituals do not have to be grand or loud to carry meaning. They can be as humble as smoothing a blanket, as simple as folding a sheet. Small gestures that hold space for the vast mysteries beyond our sight. So, as you imagine yourself smoothing the bedding each night, consider the centuries of lives who did the same. Hands moving carefully, heart steady, preparing for whatever the next dawn might, or might not bring. The beds made each night, as if for the last time, were more than just places to sleep. They were symbols of acceptance, resilience, and the deep human desire to face the unknown with calm and grace. The stories rehearsed so descendants would remember them. Imagine yourself seated by the hearth in a small, humble home somewhere in the distant past. The fire crackles softly, sending shadows that flicker gently on wooden walls blackened by smoke and time. The scent of burning oak mingles with the faint earthiness of woolen blankets and the lingering aroma of yesterday's stew. This room, simple yet alive with quiet warmth, is where stories breathe. In this place, elders take their seats, their faces lined with the gentle map of years, each wrinkle a testament to seasons weathered and memories gathered. Around them, children settle close, eager not with restless excitement, but with a calm attention that reflects the slow rhythm of their world. They are waiting, not just for tales of adventure or magic, but for something far deeper. The threads that bind their family's past to its future. Long before written records were commonplace, these stories were the living archives of everyday life. Tales of harvests spared by timely rains, of nights spent guarding flocks under star-studded skies, of long journeys to markets far beyond the village. All became the fabric of family memory. Each story, repeated again and again by the firelight, transformed ordinary lives into enduring legends. Imagine the voice of the elder, steady and measured, weaving the familiar narrative. Perhaps it is a tale of resilience, the family's survival through a harsh winter when frost withered the crops. Yet hope persisted like the stubborn green of spring shoots breaking through frozen earth. Or the memory of a great-grandparent who, with little more than grit and hands calloused from labor, repaired the roof before the next storm arrived. These stories, though modest, were no less heroic for their quietness. As children listened, their minds absorbed not only the events but the lessons beneath. The values of endurance, prudence, and care. The repetition served a purpose. To imprint these narratives so deeply that, when the elders passed beyond sight, the voices would live on. It was a rehearsal for remembrance, a way to ensure that no thread of their shared past would unravel with time. These recitations were more than family anecdotes. They were vital acts of cultural preservation, In communities where literacy was rare and books scarce, oral storytelling was the principal vessel for passing knowledge, customs, and identity. Every telling was an act of continuity, a ritual that connected generations across the silent span of years. Picture the rhythmic cadence of these tales, the pauses allowing listeners to imagine the chill of a winter dawn or the hum of bees in a summer meadow. The stories were told not just to entertain but to soothe, to teach, and to comfort, soft lanterns illuminating the long corridor of memory. This tradition also shaped social bonds. Around the hearth, stories offered a shared experience, a space where collective identity was forged. The youngest, even if too small to grasp every detail, grew familiar with names and places, with the joys and hardships of their kin. The oldest found in the telling a reaffirmation of their place within the lineage, a chance to pass the torch of heritage gently into waiting hands. Archaeological evidence hints at this practice's importance across many cultures. From cave paintings to carved runes, from early manuscripts to folk tales recorded centuries later, the human desire to tell stories, and to have those stories remembered, has persisted. In the absence of paper or ink, the spoken word became sacred, entrusted to memory and repeated with care. In quieter moments, the hearth's glow was a refuge from the unpredictability of life. Disease, harsh weather, and toil could threaten survival. Yet the stories grounded people in something lasting. They offered a sense of order, of meaning stitched into the fabric of hardship. To rehearse these tales was to rehearse hope itself. Even as centuries passed and writing spread, the value of spoken stories remained. Many families preserved particular legends or anecdotes with ritualized care, reciting them at festivals, on long winter nights, or during rites of passage. The act of telling and retelling became an unbroken thread, a quiet rebellion against forgetfulness. Imagine now the child who learned these tales by hearthside, growing into adulthood and carrying the stories like a treasured heirloom. Perhaps they too would someday sit beside a fire, their voice steady and gentle, recounting the lives of those who came before. In this way, even the most modest life was given a kind of immortality, a legacy not written on parchment, but etched in the hearts of descendants. So, as you imagine the flickering flames and the murmured words passing through generations, consider the quiet power of stories. They are the soft echoes of endurance, the gentle vessels that carry memory across time. In the stillness of night, these rehearsed tales become a comforting song, a lullaby woven from the fabric of human experience, inviting the mind to rest and dream. The bread baked for neighbors to eat in mourning. Imagine yourself in a humble village cottage, nestled among rolling fields and quiet lanes. The kitchen hearth glows softly, its warm light casting flickering shadows on the walls lined with simple wooden shelves and earthenware jars. The air carries the faint, comforting scent of wood smoke mingled with the sweetness of rising dough. Here, amidst the familiar tools of daily life, a well-worn wooden bowl, a linen cloth, a stone mill, the rhythms of work and care unfold quietly. In many peasant households, there was a quiet preparation always ongoing, tucked away from everyday eyes. A small reserve of flour or dried grains, carefully kept and saved. This was not for ordinary meals, but for a special purpose, a ritual woven into the fabric of community and compassion. It was the bread reserved for neighbors to eat in mourning, when death touched a household, inevitable in a world of uncertain health and sudden farewells. This bread took on a significance beyond mere sustenance. It became a symbol of hospitality, solidarity, and shared grief. As the family prepared to gather, mourn, and remember, the bread was baked and handed out to those who came to offer comfort and prayers. In this simple act lay a profound kindness, a softening of sorrow with something warm and tangible. Picture the hands shaping the dough, rough, calloused, yet careful, pressing and folding, then placing the loaves near the hearth to rise. The gentle crackle of embers and the slow, steady heat of the oven worked together to transform humble ingredients into sustenance for the body and balm for the spirit. The smell of freshly baked bread soon filled the cottage, a quiet invitation, a silent message. You are welcome here, even in sorrow. The bread itself was often plain, made from coarse flour, rye, or barley, dense and hearty, meant to nourish those who might have traveled some distance on foot or simply needed comfort in a difficult hour. Yet, despite its simplicity, it was rich with meaning. To receive a piece of this bread was to be embraced by the community, to share in the sorrow and the memory of a life lost. Imagine the neighbors arriving slowly, one by one, hands weathered from toil, faces shaded with quiet sadness. They gathered near the doorway or around the hearth, the air thick with soft murmurs and prayers. Each received a loaf or a small slice wrapped in cloth, the bread a reminder that life, even in its fragility, was held together by connections, by kindness, care, and the unspoken understanding that none faced grief alone. This tradition was not simply about food, but about the rhythms of village life and the weaving of social bonds. In a world where death was never far and loss could isolate, offering bread was a gesture of communal resilience. It acknowledged the pain, yes, but it also affirmed that life must continue, nurtured by mutual support. The preparation and distribution of morning bread also reflected practical realities. Flour and grain were precious commodities, carefully managed and rarely wasted. Setting aside some for this purpose was an intentional act, an investment in relationships, and a way to honor the dead through service to the living. In some regions, this bread took on particular shapes or forms. Small loaves scored with crosses, or round cakes marked with simple patterns, to symbolize faith, hope, or the cycle of life. These subtle details connected the material world of food with the spiritual world of remembrance, comforting those left behind. As the bread was shared, stories might be told, of the person who had passed, of time shared and moments cherished. The breaking and sharing of bread became a ritual of memory, binding the community through shared history and collective mourning. Imagine now the quiet fading of the day, the coals in the hearth glowing dimly, and the bread's warm scent lingering in the air. The grief remains, but softened, held gently in the presence of neighbors, in the act of giving and receiving. It is a moment of tenderness amid the steady rhythm of life and loss. So, as you imagine this simple loaf passed from hand to hand, remember that in its texture, its warmth, and its taste lies a profound expression of human connection. The bread baked for neighbors to eat in mourning was not just nourishment. It was a quiet gesture of love, a gentle thread weaving the fabric of community through the inevitability of sorrow. The herbs hung from beams to ward off evil spirits. Imagine stepping inside a humble cottage from centuries past. The scent of wood smoke mingles softly with the earthy aroma of dried plants, hanging in neat bundles from the low ceiling beams. These fragrant herbs, rosemary, lavender, rue, sway gently in the quiet air, their faded colors a muted tapestry against rough timber and plaster walls. The flicker of candlelight casts slow shadows, adding a soft warmth to the space. Yet beneath this calm lies a quiet vigilance. In these times, the invisible world was felt as deeply as the visible one. Illness and misfortune were thought to arise not only from natural causes, but from unseen forces. Evil spirits, wandering souls, or malevolent entities seeking entry. To protect themselves, families relied not on medicine alone, but on ritual and symbolism. The herbs hanging from beams were part of this protective web, an ancient practice woven into the fabric of daily life. Rosemary, with its sharp, pine-like fragrance, was believed to cleanse the air, driving away harmful influences and purifying the space. Lavender, soft and sweet, soothed not only the body but the spirit, calming restless energies. Rue, bitter and pungent, was thought to have strong protective qualities, a guard against evil that could not be seen but was deeply feared. These bundles were prepared long before illness appeared, hung carefully in homes as a shield against misfortune. Imagine the hands that gathered these plants from gardens or wild hedgerows, the gentle twisting of stems, the tying of fibers to form neat clusters. This was not just practical but sacred work, a daily act of care and caution, a reminder of life's delicate balance. Beyond their protective role, these herbs served as subtle mementos of mortality. Their presence was a gentle whisper that life was fleeting, that health was fragile and must be cherished. Every visitor stepping beneath the fragrant bundles was reminded, however softly, that existence was threaded with vulnerability. Imagine a grandmother in the dim light of evening, her hands steady as she replaces a faded bundle with fresh herbs, murmuring prayers for protection and peace. The scent rises, filling the room with a comforting, familiar aroma that settles deep into the bones. The herbs are a quiet assurance, a bridge between the seen and unseen, the living and the passing. In broader cultural terms, the use of herbs to ward off evil reflects a worldview where spiritual and physical realms were inseparable. The natural world was imbued with meaning, and the plants themselves were agents of both healing and defense. This intertwining of nature and belief created a lived experience where daily life was shaped by constant awareness of forces beyond human control. From an ethnobotanical perspective, many of these herbs indeed contain compounds that inhibit bacteria and pests, so their use also had practical benefits, even if not fully understood in scientific terms at the time. Hanging herbs helped keep living spaces fresher, reducing the spread of illness in ways both mystical and material. When illness did come, the presence of these herbs offered comfort and hope. They purified the air as the soul was believed to prepare for its journey beyond the body. Their fragrance lingered as a final blessing, a scented farewell as loved ones passed from one world to the next. Imagine the soft rustling of dried leaves in a still room where life has quietly slipped away. The herbs remain, silent sentinels guarding the threshold between life and death. Their presence is a testament to the resilience and care woven through centuries of human experience. As you rest within this calm reflection, picture those bundles hanging gently overhead, their scents blending with the fading light, reminders of protection, mortality, and the gentle rituals that sustained lives in times long past. Let their quiet strength settle over you like a soft lullaby, connecting past and present through the timeless language of scent and symbol. The simple crosses carved into hearthstones. Imagine yourself in a humble cottage, the heart of a small rural home where the fire crackles softly, its warm glow casting flickering shadows on the rough stone floor. The hearth is more than a source of heat. It is the center of life, the place where meals are prepared, stories are shared, and the day's toils are set aside. The thick, steady warmth reaches into every corner, creating a quiet sanctuary amid the chill of the outside world. Now, focus your attention downward to the stones that form the hearth's foundation. On one of these rough-hewn slabs, you notice a small, carefully carved cross. The shape is simple, a modest plus, etched deeply into the stone, its lines worn smooth by time and the passing of countless feet. This small mark holds a significance far beyond its size. It is a silent testament to faith, hope, and the intimate relationship between life, death, and the home. Peasants in many regions practice the custom of carving crosses into the hearthstones beneath their fires. These were not decorative flourishes but deliberate marks, placed with the quiet intention that this spot, bathed in the warmth and light of the hearth, would someday be the place where prayers might be said over their body. It was a way to prepare for the inevitable, an act of humble anticipation embedded in the fabric of daily life. The carving itself required patience and care. Imagine a simple chisel or knife held steady in calloused hands, tracing a cross into the hard stone surface. Each stroke was an act of quiet devotion, a physical gesture entwined with spiritual yearning. The crosses were often small and unobtrusive, yet they carried weighty meaning. The hope that, when the time came, the home would serve as more than shelter, but as a sacred space for farewell. This tradition reflects the deep connection between hearth and home in medieval and rural societies. The hearth was the spiritual and physical center of the household, symbolizing warmth, sustenance, and safety. To mark it with a cross was to bind the cycle of life and death closely to this center. To claim the home as a place where one's final prayers might be offered and where memory would linger. The crosses carved into hearthstones remained long after the voices who made them had fallen silent. Time and were softened their edges, but their quiet presence endured, embedded in the stones that bore witness to countless meals, conversations, and quiet moments by firelight. They were like whispers from the past, a trace of those who lived and hoped before. Consider the texture of these stones, rough yet steady beneath the feet, cool to the touch when the fire dies down, warmed only by the slow fading of embers. The cross, etched into the stone, would catch the soft light, its shadow shifting with the fire's dance. It was a constant, subtle reminder that life, however fleeting, was cradled by faith and the home's enduring walls. These simple carvings also speak to the pragmatism of rural life. Formal burial sites or churchyards were not always easily accessible, and homes often served multiple roles in a person's life and death. By carving crosses at the hearth, families established a sacred focal point within their daily environment, a place where the spiritual and the practical met. The act of carving was also a form of preparation, a way for individuals and families to face mortality without panic or fear. It was a quiet acknowledgement, woven into everyday tasks, that death was a natural part of life's rhythm. The crosses marked not only the place where the body might rest, but also where the soul's journey would be prayed for. Imagine the evenings when families gathered around these hearths, the flicker of firelight casting gentle illumination across the carved crosses, the sound of whispered prayers, the soft rustle of cloth, the muted crackling of burning wood, all combined to create a sacred atmosphere. In these moments, the crosses stood as silent sentinels, linking past, present, and future. From a cultural perspective, these hearth crosses highlight the ways faith was interwoven into the physical environment. Unlike grand cathedrals or ornate tombstones, these marks were modest and intimate, reflecting the daily devotion of people who lived close to the land and to each other. They reveal how spirituality was not confined to churches alone, but inhabited the very stones beneath their feet. As time passed, many such hearth crosses survived the centuries, discovered by archaeologists in the ruins of long-abandoned homes. These small carvings offer us a glimpse into the lives and beliefs of those who shaped their world quietly, without fanfare, but with enduring faith. They remind us that even the simplest marks can carry profound meaning. Imagine yourself now, resting beside such a hearth, the warmth seeping into your bones, the faint outline of a cross beneath your feet. The fire's glow softens your thoughts, guiding you gently into reflection on the delicate balance between life and what comes after, held together by faith, family, and the enduring stones beneath the flame. As your thoughts drift, allow the image of the simple cross carved into hearthstone to settle, a quiet emblem of hope, remembrance, and the intimate bond between a home and those who dwell within its warmth. The wooden chests packed with all they meant to leave. Imagine a quiet, shadowed corner of a humble cottage, where a sturdy wooden chest rests patiently beneath the window's soft, filtered light. Its surface is worn smooth by years of use, scuffed edges, faint scratches, and a faded iron latch that creaks gently when opened. This chest is more than simple storage. It is a silent guardian of memory, carefully packed with a few precious belongings meant to endure beyond a single lifetime. In many rural homes throughout the medieval and early modern periods, these wooden chests held a unique significance. They were repositories not just of possessions, but of identity, of the things people wished to carry forward, even after they were gone. A single chest might contain a linen shift, simple homespun, yet clean and folded with care. A carved wooden spoon, shaped lovingly by a family member's hands. A rosary, beads worn smooth from years of prayer and contemplation. Each item within these chests was chosen with intention, each piece a testament to the life lived and the legacy hoped to be left behind. The contents were not extravagant or numerous. Rather, they were humble tokens imbued with meaning, reminders of family, faith, and daily labor. Chroniclers of the time often remarked on these chests. They observed how, in quiet corners of cottages or small rooms, these vessels sat undisturbed for decades. The wood, aged and mellowed, bore witness to the passage of years and generations. The chest was patient, waiting silently as seasons turned and lives unfolded beyond its sturdy frame. Imagine the texture of the chest's wood, rough in places, polished smooth in others, the grain telling stories of trees felled long ago. The faint scent of pine or oak lingers in the air, mingling with the earthy smells of the home. Opening the chest, you might feel the weight of a linen shift, soft yet firm, folded carefully to avoid wrinkles. The carved spoon rests nestled beside it, its handle worn with gentle grooves. The rosary's beads catch the light, a quiet shimmer amid the muted tones. The act of assembling this chest was itself a kind of ritual, a deliberate gathering of what mattered most, a careful selection of items to be remembered by. Families might add to it over years, passing heirlooms down, folding in new keepsakes as life progressed. In times of uncertainty, such as the threat of illness or the approach of old age, the chest became a tangible preparation for the inevitable transition. These chests also served practical functions. In an era when possessions were few and precious, having a single place to store and protect valued items was essential. The chest was locked or secured to keep belongings safe from damage, pests, or theft. It was both a container and a protector. But beyond practicality, the chest represented something more profound. It was a symbol of continuity, a vessel for memory, hope, and identity. What was placed inside would become a small legacy, a silent message to those who came after. It spoke of what had mattered, what had been cherished. In some cases, these chests contained documents or small personal notes, written prayers, or scraps of cloth from a cherished garment. Each edition was a fragment of life's story, carefully preserved. The chest was, in essence, a private archive of personal history. The presence of these chests across households speaks to the human desire to hold on to meaning beyond the fleeting moment. In a world where lives could be cut short by disease, conflict, or hardship, assembling and tending these chests was a quiet way of asserting continuity, of whispering to the future. This was who I was. This is what I valued. Imagine the quiet evenings when a family might gather near the chest, adding or rearranging its contents, sharing stories of each object's significance. The ritual was a comfort, a connection linking past, present, and future. Despite the passing centuries, echoes of this tradition endure. Many antique chests, found in old houses or passed down through families, still carry traces of this legacy. The faded scent of lavender, the imprint of folded linens, the faint outline of forgotten keepsakes. They remind us that material objects, however simple, can carry profound emotional and spiritual weight. So, as you picture this wooden chest sitting patiently in its corner, remember that it is more than wood and iron. It is a quiet vessel of human experience, filled with the small treasures people meant to leave behind. It holds the careful choices of those who understood that what we keep and pass on shapes not only our memory, but the very fabric of what endures. The wooden chests packed with all they meant to leave were silent companions through the years, patient as time passed, and steadfast in their promise to carry a legacy beyond the final day. The handwritten names of those who should be forgiven. Imagine a quiet, modest room in a peasant's cottage. The light outside has softened, giving way to the cool hush of evening. Inside, the faint glow of a small oil lamp flickers, casting wavering shadows on rough wooden walls. The air is thick with the faint scent of smoke and worn cloth, the familiar smells of a lifetime spent tending hearth and home. In this stillness, there is a small, unassuming piece of parchment resting on a table, its edges frayed and softened by time. On it, in careful but unpracticed handwriting, lie a handful of names. These are not just names written down for record or remembrance. They carry a deeper purpose. They are the names of those who have caused hurt, those who, in life, brought offense or grievance to the writer's heart. Imagine the hands that wrote them, perhaps trembling slightly, marked by toil and age. The ink, dark and slightly faded, forms letters that speak of human complexity. The tangled weave of family ties, neighborly disputes, misunderstandings, moments of sharp words or unspoken resentment. In a world where grievances could linger like shadows in the corners of small communities, these names carried weight beyond the ink on the page. Yet this list was not meant to endure. It was a ritual of release, a conscious act of letting go. When the end approached, the final breath drawn and the body still, the parchment would be set aflame. The curling smoke would carry away not just the paper, but the bitterness, the grudges, and the heavy burden of unforgiven wrongs. In this simple act, the writer sought peace beyond the veil of life, hoping no ill feelings would cross the threshold to the world beyond. This practice speaks volumes about the quiet wisdom and resilience woven into peasant life. Forgiveness here was not only a personal grace, but a necessity for community harmony. In small villages and tight-knit families, holding on to bitterness could mean ongoing strife, fracturing bonds crucial for survival. The ritual of burning these names was both an acknowledgement of human imperfection and a final plea for reconciliation. Imagine, too, the sensory texture of the moment. The soft crackle of flame licking at parchment edges, the slow unfurling of smoke as it rises, carrying with it the weight of grievances past. The warmth of the fire mingles with a quiet hope, a wish that after death, there might be no lingering shadows, only calm. This custom reflects broader human themes, timeless and universal. Across cultures and ages, the act of writing names, forgiving transgressions, and symbolically releasing pain has been a part of funerary and cleansing rites. Whether in prayers, confessions, or symbolic burnings, people have sought ways to leave behind the burdens that weigh on the soul. The handwritten names, carefully inscribed and then consumed by flame, offer a delicate balance between memory and release. They remind us that even amid hardship, people strove to find peace, not just in life, but beyond it. In the flickering light of that humble room, forgiveness took tangible form, a final gift given quietly to oneself and to others. So, imagine now the house emptied, the flames dwindled to glowing embers, and the air cleared of smoke. What remains is a silence filled with gentle acceptance, a space freed from bitterness and ready to welcome what comes next. The names, once written and burned, become part of the soft unfolding of memory and release, a subtle, lasting gesture woven into the fabric of human experience. The quiet vows made beside cold winter windows. Imagine a cold winter evening in a small, humble cottage nestled deep within a quiet village. Outside, the wind presses against wooden shutters, carrying the faint scent of frost and smoke. Inside, the air is still but for the soft crackle of embers in the hearth, and the pale light of a single candle casting long, wavering shadows on rough-hewn walls. The warmth is modest, yet it holds the room in a gentle embrace. In this hushed setting, a solitary figure sits beside a frost-dusted window, gazing out into the darkness that stretches beyond the glass. The night is deep and still, a blank canvas for thoughts and memories. It was here, according to chroniclers and the quiet testimonies passed down through generations, that many peasants made their most intimate vows, silent promises to themselves, whispered into the cold night air. These were not grand declarations or spoken aloud to others, but personal reckonings, moments of reflection and peace. The belief was held gently, without ceremony, that making peace with one's regrets and unspoken worries while still alive eased the soul's passage from this world. To settle old disputes in the heart, to forgive oneself for mistakes made long ago, to confess quietly the fears and sorrows that might otherwise weigh heavily after death. These were acts of inner cleansing. Imagine the slow rhythm of breath as this quiet person speaks softly to the darkness. Words meant not for ears, but for the soul itself. Perhaps they recall a harsh word said in anger, a kindness left undone, a moment of fear or doubt that lingered too long. These confessions, spoken only to the night, were a way of untangling the threads of life's complexities, of easing the mind before the long sleep. The cold window pane, frosted and still, served as a boundary between the warmth of life and the vast unknown beyond. It was a silent witness to these intimate vows, silent, patient, and unjudging. The darkness beyond the shutters was not feared, but embraced as a companion in these moments of solitude. This practice reveals something deeply human, a need to prepare not only the body and the world around us for the end, but also the spirit within. It speaks of a profound understanding, passed down quietly through the ages, that death is not only a physical event, but also a spiritual journey, eased by clarity and peace. The winter night stretches on, cold and deep, as these whispered words drift softly into the silence. The hearth's warmth flickers gently, the candle's flame dances, and the quiet vows settle like a gentle snowfall on the soul. As you imagine this scene, the stillness, the soft whisper of breath, and the weight lifted by unburdened heart, you are invited to share in a timeless moment. A bridge between the living and the beyond, held in the calm embrace of winter's quiet. The grave clothes mended each year as a ritual of readiness. Imagine the soft light of a late autumn afternoon filtering through a small cottage window. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of dry leaves and wood smoke, settling gently in the quiet room. In a simple chest or woven basket lies a piece of fine linen, the burial shroud, folded neatly but never forgotten. This cloth, meant to wrap the body when life's final breath has passed, holds a place not only in storage but in the rhythm of the year. Unlike a garment worn daily and discarded when worn out, the shroud was a piece to be tended, cared for, and preserved. Imagine the hands of a family member, often a woman, slowly unfolding the linen, smoothing out creases with a tenderness that borders on reverence. The fabric is soft from years of careful storage, yet fragile, edges worn thin by time. This was no simple chore, but a humble ceremony, the ritual of readiness. Each year, the shroud was taken from its resting place, inspected with quiet eyes. Tears or loose threads were carefully mended, needle and thread working in a gentle rhythm, repairing what time had frayed. This act of mending was both practical and symbolic, a recognition of life's fragility and the inevitability of the future. Imagine the stillness of the room during these moments. The only sound, the faint scratch of needle-piercing linen, the soft pull of thread drawing tight, the slow folding of cloth returning to its resting place. The ritual invited reflection on the passing seasons, on the loved ones gathered here now, and on those yet to come. The grave clothes were not simply objects but reminders. Their annual care was a quiet acknowledgement that tomorrow could bring final rest. Life, with all its daily labors and joys, existed always beside the shadow of death, and this ritual bridged the gap between them. It asked for acceptance, for preparedness without fear, for peace in the face of uncertainty. In villages across Europe, this tradition connected families through generations. The same shroud might be mended for decades, passed from mother to daughter, each stitch a link in a chain of care and remembrance. It was a humble legacy, one woven not from riches or grandeur, but from steadfast love and respect for the cycle of existence. From a cultural perspective, this ritual reinforced a worldview where death was a natural part of life, never distant but never rushed. The grave clothes were not hidden or shunned, but integrated into the domestic sphere. A presence alongside everyday linens and tools, a quiet participant in the rhythms of home. Archaeological finds often reveal shrouds worn and mended, their delicate fabrics bearing the marks of repeated care. These clues speak of a lived experience, of hands that refused to let go, that prepared for loss with slow, deliberate acts. Each repair was a meditation on time, an intimate conversation between the present and the inevitable. Imagine, too, the contrasts this ritual drew out. The softness of the linen against the hardness of stone graves. The warmth of family care versus the cold certainty of death. The gentle mending of fabric against the unraveling of life. These dualities were woven together in the ritual, creating a space where acceptance and hope quietly coexisted. As you listen, let the image of those grave clothes unfold and fold softly in your mind. Let the slow, steady rhythm of needle and thread lull your thoughts. Picture the quiet rooms where this annual ceremony took place. Rooms full of lived history, love, and gentle readiness. The grave clothes, mended year after year, remind us that preparation for the inevitable need not be rushed or fearful. Instead, it can be a measured, respectful act, an embrace of life's fleeting nature, held tenderly in the folds of cloth and memory. Let this thought rest with you now, a soft benediction as you drift towards sleep. The ritual of mending, the quiet readiness, the gentle acceptance, all woven into the fabric of time, waiting patiently for the final moment that, like the turning of a season, will come to us all. Would you like me to help format this for slower, meditative pacing, or add suggestions for a calming ambient soundscape? The ashes saved to mark the threshold of farewell. Imagine yourself standing in the quiet of a humble cottage, where the day's last light filters softly through a small window, casting long shadows across worn wooden floors. The hearth, once lively with crackling flames and the scent of simmering stew, now rests as a pile of glowing embers, quietly cooling beneath the soot-darkened chimney. Nearby, a small clay pot waits patiently, unassuming but deeply significant. In many rural homes, this pot held a special purpose, one not often spoken aloud, but understood in the gentle rhythms of family life. It was kept ready to receive the ashes of the hearth's final fire, saved carefully to mark a moment that all must face, the farewell of a loved one. When death came, and a family member passed from this life, it was customary to sprinkle ashes from the last fire across the doorway, the threshold between the inside of the home and the world beyond. This act was both practical and symbolic, a quiet ritual to honor the passage from life to death, and to protect those who remained. Imagine the texture of those ashes, soft, powdery, tinged with a faint scent of burnt wood and earth. They were gathered with care, sometimes from the very embers that had warmed the household in its final days. The ashes carried with them the essence of the hearth, the center of life and warmth, now transformed into a tangible marker of loss and transition. The doorway, marked by these ashes, became a sacred boundary. It was a subtle signal that the household had experienced a profound change, that grief and remembrance now inhabited the space. The ashes were a protective barrier, believed to guard the home against lingering spirits or misfortune, while also serving as a reminder that life's presence was now altered. This ritual, simple yet profound, reveals much about how peasants approach death, not as a distant or abstract concept, but as an intimate part of daily existence. Keeping a small pot ready to hold ashes was an act of quiet preparation, woven into the fabric of the household. Though the practice may have been rarely spoken of openly, it was deeply understood, passed down in gestures and unspoken agreements. Picture the pot itself, made of rough clay, its surface mottled with stains from years of use. cool to the touch but sturdy and familiar. It rested near the hearth, a humble sentinel waiting for its role. When the time came, hands steady despite sorrow, the ashes were gathered and gently scattered across the threshold, leaving a faint dusting that caught the light in the morning sun. The ashes did not only mark loss but also connection. They held the memory of the fire that had warmed meals, fueled stories, and brought comfort through long nights. In their scattering, the family honored the continuity between life's warmth and the quiet stillness that follows. The threshold became a place of both departure and remembrance. Consider the sensory world surrounding this ritual. The faint smell of smoke lingering in the air, the softness of ash underfoot, the muted light filtering through curtains drawn against the chill. The doorway, once simply an entrance and exit, took on deeper meaning. A line between worlds, between what was and what would be. This practice also underscores how faith and superstition often intertwined in daily life. The ashes were thought to hold protective power, keeping unwanted spirits at bay, and ensuring the safety of those still living within the home. In an age when illness and death were constant threats, such rituals offered reassurance amid uncertainty. Imagine evenings when family members sat quietly, the hearth cold, the pot empty once again, but the memory of ashes on the threshold lingering like a gentle echo. The unspoken presence of loss shaped the atmosphere, a silent witness to lives lived and loved, to farewells given in the softest of ways. From a broader perspective, the custom of saving ashes to mark a threshold connects with a universal human impulse, to give shape and meaning to transitions. It reflects a desire to acknowledge endings while protecting beginnings, to honor those who have passed while guarding those who remain. As you imagine yourself in that quiet room, the subtle weight of the pot nearby, the faint trace of ashes along the doorframe, allow your mind to drift gently. The ritual is a soft bridge between worlds, a quiet act of love and memory that crosses time, connecting past and present. Let the image of ashes marking a threshold settle like a whisper, a gentle reminder of the fragile boundary between presence and absence, and the tender care woven into the rituals of farewell. The rosaries hung on hooks beside the door. Imagine a small cottage, its worn wooden door framed by thick stone walls softened by centuries of weathering. Just inside, near the entrance where the air carries the mingled scents of wood smoke and earth, hangs a simple hook. From this hook dangles a rosary, beads strung together with care, worn smooth from years of handling. Each bead a quiet witness to countless prayers whispered in stillness. In many medieval and early modern homes, it was customary to keep a rosary close at hand, often hung near the door or beside the hearth, within easy reach for moments both everyday and extraordinary. This placement was not accidental, but deeply intentional. The rosary was more than a string of beads. It was a spiritual anchor, a tactile companion for faith, comfort, and preparation. Imagine the weight of the beads in one's hands, their smoothness worn down by repeated prayers spoken softly in the twilight hours. The rhythmic passage of fingers along the beads matched the steady pulse of meditation and devotion, a calming practice woven into the fabric of daily life. The rosary was a bridge to the divine, a means of counting prayers, of seeking solace and strength. Chroniclers of the time took note of this humble but profound tradition. They described how rosaries, hung in simple places like hooks by the door, bore the imprint of human touch over years and decades. Each evening's prayer, each whispered plea or thanksgiving, left a trace, an invisible yet palpable history embedded in the beads themselves. The placement of the rosary near the door also carried symbolic weight. The doorway marks a threshold, the boundary between the safety of home and the uncertain world outside, between waking and resting, between life and the mysteries beyond. Keeping the rosary here was a quiet preparation, a reminder that faith accompanies one at every crossing. In times of illness or approaching death, the rosary became an especially vital companion. when the last hour drew near. Holding the familiar beads provided comfort and focus. The repetitive prayers offered a sense of control, a way to meet the unknown with calm resolve. The rosary was a constant presence, steady and reassuring. Picture the rosary's beads catching the soft light. Perhaps made of wood, bone, or polished stone, their color muted but warm. The cross hanging at the end, simple and unadorned, swings gently with the slightest movement. The hook from which it hangs may be roughly fashioned, but it holds this precious object with care. This quiet detail, the rosary on a hook, reveals much about the rhythms of faith in everyday medieval life. Religious devotion was not confined to grand cathedrals or public ceremonies, but lived intimately in the home. Objects like the rosary carried spiritual weight precisely because they were woven into daily habits and familiar spaces. Imagine a mother finishing her evening chores, stepping to the door to hang the rosary back on its hook before retiring for the night, or an elder family member reaching for the beads during a moment of solitude, fingers tracing the familiar path of prayers learned long ago. These small acts were part of a larger tapestry of quiet devotion. The rosary's presence near the door also offered protection in a metaphorical sense. In a world filled with uncertainty, threats from illness, hardship, and the unknown, having a spiritual talisman ready at the threshold was a way of inviting grace and safeguarding the household. Over time, many of these rosaries would absorb not just the touch of prayers, but the stories and hopes of generations. Though fragile, they carried resilience, embodying the persistence of faith through changing times. So as you imagine this rosary hanging patiently on its hook beside the door, consider the countless hands that have grasped its beads in moments of need, gratitude, or reflection. Each bead is a quiet echo of devotion, each prayer a breath bridging the earthly and the divine. The rosaries hung on hooks beside the door were humble yet profound reminders of faith's quiet presence in the everyday. A steady companion for life's thresholds, and a gentle comfort as the final hour approached. The simple songs sung to practice dying well. Imagine yourself gathered with others around a fire, the night air cool and still, while the warm glow from the flames dances softly on faces lined with years of labor and quiet endurance. The scent of burning wood drifts gently upward, mingling with the faint sweetness of herbs drying nearby. In this circle, voices rise, not loud or hurried, but steady and measured, as simple songs begin to weave through the air. These are not songs of celebration or festivity, but chants, verses learned and repeated through countless evenings, taught by church elders and shared among neighbors. They are songs rehearsed with intention, carrying words meant to soothe the soul and prepare the heart for the inevitable passage from life to death. In a time when illness and hardship often came without warning, and death was a constant shadow in daily life, peasants turned to these chants as a source of calm strength. Knowing the verses by heart was believed to help the dying face their final moments with dignity and peace. The rhythm of the words, the gentle melodies, offered a familiar anchor amid uncertainty, a kind of spiritual rehearsal for the soul's journey. Imagine the texture of these gatherings, the murmur of voices rising and falling, sometimes joined by the soft tapping of hands or the faint rustle of shifting feet. The songs might speak of light breaking through darkness, of resting in the arms of a loving presence, or of the hope for renewal beyond the earthly realm. Their simplicity was a comfort, accessible to all, uniting communities in a shared language of faith and acceptance. These chants were practiced not only in church, but in the warmth of homes, by hearth and firelight, where family members would gather to prepare one another for life's final transition. Through repetition, the verses became a balm, a quiet promise that even in death, one was not alone. The melodies themselves were often gentle and repetitive, echoing the natural rhythms of breathing and heartbeat. They invited contemplation rather than distraction, allowing the mind to settle as the body's strength waned. Singing these songs was both an act of faith and a means to cultivate serenity, a deliberate shaping of the spirit's farewell. Across cultures and centuries, similar practices have emerged: chants, hymns, prayers, offering solace at life's edge. This human impulse to prepare through song reveals the profound role that ritual plays in making sense of endings. The simple songs sung by peasants around their fires were part of this timeless tradition, tenderly holding the boundary between living and passing on. Picture now the quiet moments when the chanting fades and silence returns, soft and full. The fire's glow dims, yet its warmth remains, much like the lasting comfort these songs left in the hearts of those who learned them. In the gentle echo of remembered verses, the spirit found a measure of peace, a graceful readiness to move beyond. So, as you imagine these simple songs flowing softly in the night, consider the power of voice and memory, of shared ritual and humble melodies. They are small threads of light in the vast tapestry of human experience, quiet aids that help souls to rest and minds to wander peacefully towards sleep. The blessings whispered to the walls in final preparation. Imagine yourself standing quietly in a modest village cottage, its wooden beams darkened by years of smoke and weather, its walls cool and sturdy, holding the faint scent of hearth fire and aged stone. Outside, the steady rhythm of village life hums softly. Distant footsteps on cobblestones, the occasional murmur of voices carried on the breeze. But inside this simple home, a different kind of ritual is unfolding. A final kindness, a whispered farewell. In many rural communities of centuries past, it was believed that the soul's peaceful passage from life was aided by gentle blessings spoken directly to the stones and timbers that sheltered a person in their final days. This quiet ritual, sometimes called a blessing whispered to the walls, was a way for peasants to express gratitude, to offer peace, and to prepare not only themselves, but also the very spaces that had held their lives. Imagine a figure moving slowly through their home, hand lightly tracing the rough surface of a wooden post or the cool, uneven texture of a stone wall. The voice is soft and low, words spoken not to another person, but to the house itself, a murmur of thanks and hope, a prayer for calm and comfort. "May you hold me gently," they might say, "when I am no longer here," or "keep the warmth for those who come after." Chroniclers of the time, those who carefully observed and recorded the rhythms of peasant life, wrote of this ritual as one of the last acts of care a person could offer. It was neither ostentatious nor hurried, but deliberate and intimate, a slow, contemplative moment amidst the challenges of daily existence. The walls of these homes were more than mere structures. They were silent witnesses to births and blessings, to daily meals and shared laughter, to the quiet struggles of harvest and hardship. They held the imprint of countless lives, absorbing the warmth of hearth fires, the scent of fresh bread, the soft murmur of prayers. To speak blessings to these walls was to acknowledge that connection, to honor the space that had protected and sustained. Imagine the sensation of rough stone under fingertips, cool and steady, grounding the person as they face the unknown. The house, worn yet enduring, became a companion in the final journey, a place to which the soul might gently release its hold. The blessing was a way of weaving together life and death, matter and spirit, memory and release. This practice also reflected broader cultural beliefs about the relationship between humans and their surroundings. The home was not simply a shelter, but a living part of the community's spiritual fabric. Blessings spoken to its walls acknowledged a reciprocal care, a respect that the earth and the built environment offered sanctuary, and in return, the inhabitant offered gratitude and hope. Imagine now the atmosphere during these final moments. The air thick with the scent of smoke and worn wood, softened by the faint trace of dried herbs, hung near the hearth for healing or protection. The light is dim, filtered through small windows frost-laced from cold outside. The voice moves slowly, softly, weaving prayers into the silence, allowing the mind to drift gently between past and future. In villages where such customs were common, these blessings often accompanied other rituals, simple preparations for burial, prayers said aloud or in silence, the presence of family and neighbors bearing witness. Life, with all its unpredictability and hardship, was met with these steady acts of kindness and intention. This ritual also helped to frame death not as a sudden rupture, but as part of the natural cycle, an unfolding that was acknowledged and eased by thoughtful preparation. The whispered blessings to the walls were, in a way, a final thread tying the living world to what comes after, a way to calm fears and soothe the spirit. As you imagine yourself in that small, quiet room, the warmth of the hearth flickering softly, the cool touch of stone beneath your fingertips, and the gentle murmur of words meant for walls rather than ears, you may sense the depth of this connection. A moment of calm acceptance in the rhythm of life and death. Over time, these whispered blessings became part of the collective memory of communities, recorded in chronicles and passed down in stories. Though the houses themselves may have long since crumbled or been rebuilt, the echo of those final kindnesses remains, a testament to the human desire to find peace and meaning even in the face of mortality. So, as you rest in your own quiet space, imagine the gentle murmur of blessings spoken centuries ago, a soft thread of comfort woven through stone and timber, carrying the hopes of those who came before you. The walls may be silent now, but in that silence lives a kindness, a farewell, and a wish for peace.